HTTP. In the last session, we have seen about your XML and JSON. So your XML and JSON is the format of exchanging the data. Now we want to use protocols. What is a protocol? Protocol is a set of rules. Now I am taking the class. While I am taking the class, we are following a protocol. Boss, while I am explaining, you are supposed to listen. While you are asking a question, I should not explain. Now, while you are talking, I should listen, and while I am talking, you should listen. It's a common protocol. Both of us are talking at a time, then we will not be able to understand what we are trying to convey. And we are following, only one person has to ask the query at a time. Now, what was this? This is the set of rules. Now, when I am taking this class, I said, boss, until the theoretical explanation is completed, don't interrupt the class. At the explanation of the concept, at the end of the topic, you can ask all your queries. Then this is what? This is the set of guidelines what we are following to conduct a session. Protocol is the set of rules which both the parties are obeying to communicate with each other. It's a set of rules which both the parties are obeying to communicate with each other. Again, I repeat. Protocol is a set of rules which both the parties are using to communicate with each other. Now, when you say protocol, there are different types of protocols we have. Now, what was that? First one. What are the popular protocols? What are the popular protocols we have? Protocols. When you say protocol, generally used protocols are what? Your HTTP. Then we have HTTP protocol. SOAP we have. Then we have SMTP. FTP, Telnet, ICP, IP. Now, the commonly used protocols are, what are the commonly used protocols? One is HTTP, TCP/IP, IP, FTP, SMTP. These are very commonly used protocols. HTTP, TCP/IP, IP, FTP, SMTP. These are very commonly used protocols. Now, different people use different protocols to communicate with each other. So, what is the final definition of a protocol? Protocol means set of rules which both the parties are trying to agree while communicating with each other. Name some of the protocols we know. Right? HTTP, then IP, TCP, Telnet, then we have FTP, SMTP. All these are set of protocols. Now, out of this, which protocol we are trying to understand now? We are trying to understand HTTP protocol. What is this HTTP protocol? Hypertext transfer protocol. Hypertext transfer protocol. So what they are doing? Hypertext transfer protocol. Now when you are going for the hypertext transfer protocol, what type of rules they will follow? What is the structure of this protocol? How they are obeyed? First, let us understand the basic points. If you are planning to go for a hypertext transfer protocol, we need a client, we need a server. How many types of servers we have? Application server, web servers. Application servers and web servers. Web servers are used for what? For building web applications. If you want to build web application, we will go for web server. Application servers are used for what? For building web application or enterprise application. Application servers will support web application as well as enterprise application. Your force.com is a web server or application server? Your force.com is what? Application server, in which we can build enterprise as well as web application. Right. Okay. Now we have client. Generally, who will be your client in your integration? Who will be a client? Generally, client will be a browser. In some cases, in the HTTP, client is always a browser. But in the protocol, if you want to communicate using a protocol, two systems are trying to communicate. Client may be a UI on your system, like data loader is there. When you had a data loader, what you are doing, you install that application on your system, and you are accessing the data, or pulling the data, or putting the data. Your data loader is also what? One of the exe tool which is available to communicate with the Salesforce. But there it is not using it. Okay, web browser. Depends upon the protocol, the client will change. In some of the protocols, client may be a browser. In some of the protocol, client may be your email server. Right. In some of the protocol, client may be any exe file or UI. So it depends. But in HTTP, who is going to be your client? Your web browser is going to be the client. So if you want to go with HTTP, we need to understand. We should have a server and a client. And the server is, in your case, it can be a web server or application server. Client is your browser. Okay. Now, the moment I said it is a browser, what are the terminologies we need to understand? Now, what are the terminologies we are going to understand? If I say it's a browser, first thing that we need to understand is what is a URL. In some of the times, you are going to say URI. In some cases, you say URL. In some cases, you say URL. If you look at some of the documents, they will be saying URI. In some documents, you find URL. In some documents, you find URL. What is this URL? What is this URI? What is this URL? And what is the syntax of these three? Let us understand. Quickly, let me show the diagrammatical representation. Now, look at this basic diagrammatical representation. When I say URI, URI can be URL or URL. URI can be URL or URL. URI can be URL or URL. When I say URL, it's a naming. So what is the form of URL, full form of URL? What is the full form of URL? Uniform Resource Locator. What is I? Uniform Resource Identifier. What is an Uniform Resource Name? Resource name, resource location, identifier. How do you identify the resource? Resource can be identified based on the name or location. Resource can be identified based on the name or based on the location. If you are trying to identify based on the name, it is a URL. If you are trying to identify based on the location, it is URL. So, URL or URL. When I say identified, URI. URI can be a URL or URL. Now I told, boss, where is your file? I told ap5.salesforce.com/ap5.salesforce.com/ okay, apex/my page. We give location of the page. In the salesforce.com, in apex, I have my page. I am giving the location of my page. That is a URL. How do you open a Visual Force page? Now I told section header, title, subtitle, help equal to /apex my help. What I am giving there? I am giving the address of the page where resource is available. which is called URL. I have a page, Apex page block, title, help URL. I am giving the address of the page where the content is available. So generally we are going to use what? URL. But if you are purchasing a books online, how the books are recognized? ISBN number 001001. So based on the ISBN number, they recognize the books. Generally, if you purchase any novels or any books, they recognize it based on what? ISBN number. Now, they are not recognized based on the address. Books are recognized based on number. ISBN number so and so. Right. Now, if you go to some of the websites, HDFC Securities //HDFS online HDFCbanking.com, or else if you go to GoDaddy, let us say people are red bus, right? Bus.com. Now, this is the location, but what was this? Right? The naming. They are identified based on the name. They are identified based on the name. Okay. They are identified based on the name. Now, if you go with the news, if you go with the they don't use HTTPS. They use CNN news. Okay, they recognize with the name. Resource recognized based on the name. Resource recognized based on the URL. So any one of this is called URI. So URI can be a URL or URL. Every URL is a URI. Every URI is not a URL. So in the documentation, if you open any documentation, if they are mentioning anywhere URI, it can be a URL or URL. Every URL is a URI. Every URI may not be a URL. That we need to understand, because when you down the line, when you read the documentations for integrating, you'll be finding a word called URI instead of URL. Right? I hope you're good. So what is the URL now? What is the URL now? URL is what? Uniform Resource Identifier. Okay. Let us go back to this. When you are going to the Uniform Resource Identifier, right? Let us look at this. What is there in the uniform resource located? Generally, how your paths will be there, boss? Let me open the page. How your path will be? This is the URL what I am giving. Generally, this is the format in which we create URL. When you are going to this, we need to understand this is divided into 4 parts. This is the first part. This is the second part. And this rest will be the third part. Basically, one more element will be there. Generally, we don't write, but we are supposed to. I'll tell you about that point. So there are 3 things here. Let us first discuss about these 3. First, HTTP. What was this? Protocol. The first element what we have taken is a protocol. Now, what is this protocol? It specifies which protocol they are using to communicate. The first element what we have taken is a protocol. Spell mistake. Protocol. This will specify which set of rules we are following to communicate. The first one is the protocol, which will specify which set of rules we are using to communicate. Then you are finding this host name. Okay, on which server the application is running, from where you, which server you are calling this, ap5.salesforce.com. It is the name of my host name. Then apex slash rest resource, name of the path of the resource of this. So in the URL we have a protocol, host name, path of the resource. Right? Don't copy. Still, I'll modify this. Protocol, host name, path of the resource. But practically, what will happen here? We require a port number. Internally, there will be one more concept called port number. What is this port number? Let us say these two systems are communicating. These two systems are communicating. Let us assume one is Java, other one is Salesforce. When two systems are trying to communicate, this is how it happens. Now, there are two people. This is a 3-floor building. Now, if this person opened this door, sending any message, this person opened this door, sending any message. Now, who has to open the door? If this person is trying to send the data, if this person also open the door, the data will be transferred. Alright. Now, if I am sending the data from here, if this person open, communication will not happen. Right? What was this door called? Each door is called a port number. In the processor, multiple ports will be there. Multi-processor. For every processor, there will be a port number. Port number will be there. So, if I am sending a message from this port number, the receiver also will receive this message on the same port number. If I am sending the number from 8086, the other end also will receive the message from 8086. If I am sending from 1521, the other end also will receive the message on 1521. So whichever the port number from which you are sending the message, the other side also will receive the message on the same port number. Are you getting my point? If I am sending a message on the one port, the other end also will receive the message on the same port. Right. So every communication will happen with one port number. Then if port number is a mandatory, then if the port number is mandatory, why you are not mentioning? So how the URL will be? Protocol, host name, colon, slash, this is actual URL. Protocol, host name, port number, path of the resource. Right? This is actual URL. But we generally we neglect to write the port number. Why? Why don't write? Boss, if you are following, if you are not mentioning, default port numbers will come. Default port numbers based on what? If it is HTTP, there is a default port number. HTTPS, default port number. FTP, default port number. For every protocol, there is a default port number. In case, if you are not mentioning any port number, default port number of that protocol is taken. That is the reason, even though you are not mentioning the port number, request is going. So, for every protocol, there will be a default port number. In case if you are not mentioning, the port number, by default port number will be taken into account. So what are the default port numbers? Let us take this basic. Now look at the basic. What are the default port numbers based on the protocol? First, 80. non-secure. Now our port numbers. This is with respect to IBM they have given. You require general port numbers. Right. Yeah. So generally, look at this format. When you're going for a Tomcat application, what we generally give? Localhost 8080, right? Then 8433. So what was that? For every application, let us say application web servers. Look at this. These are the port number. Generally, when you are going to give, we are going to give some port numbers here. So SSH 20 number, 22, telnet. So generally, what was that? So every application will have default port numbers. Now our port numbers, HTTP, what was that? 80, not secured. HTTPS 443, secured. Then SSH 22. Then SMTP 25. DNS 53. These are the generally used port numbers. FTP, HTTP, HTTPS, then SMTP, SSH. These are commonly used services. FTP 21, HTTP, HTTPS, then we have SSH, SMTP. Now, this is what we are going to use for integration. Suppose you are using other technologies like Oracle. If you are using a Oracle, if you are using a type 4 driver, what we give? Localhost, okay. Java is okay. Oracle, okay. JDBC, ODBC, ODBC colon 1521. What is that 1521? Default Oracle port number is 1521. If it is already occupied, we will change the port number. If it is already occupied, we will change the port number. Otherwise, the default port number is 1521. That's how we are getting here. What was the database? Where is my Oracle? 1521. MagnoDB 2701. SQL Server. MySQL. When you are making a database connection, in the type 4 driver, you will be finding this. Okay. Then what else we will be using? Okay. So out of this, what are the important things for us? What you may encounter in the future? General, Oracle, MySQL, right? Then we have MagnoDB, Oracle, MagnoDB, MySQL. This is very commonly encountered database port numbers 1521, 27017, 3306. Similarly, what we generally encounter? FTP, HTTP, HTTPS, and okay, SSH, SMTP. Now, are we installing the mailing server for the Salesforce? You are sending outbound message and inbound messages, right? Now, if you want to send any email from any application, we require SMTP server, right? Mail transfer protocol. But are we installing this? In the Salesforce, we are getting SMTP as a built-in. That's why we are not configuring it. If you take any other technology that SMTP need to be installed, then only you will be able to send a email or receive the email. So for that SMTP, what do we have? 25. FTP, SMTP, HTTP, HTTPS. Okay. Then what are the other servers we are going to use? Tomcat. Then we are going to use Tomcat. We can use WebLogic 7001. Then we had, right. So just to tell you that different protocols are there for different formats. So if you go for my Jetty 8080, right. So for every server, there is a default port number. For every database, there is a default port number. For every protocol, there is a default port number. Port number for application, port number for server, port number for database, port number for database. For databases, different specified default port numbers are there. For every protocol, default port numbers are there. For every server, there is a default port number. That's the reason why we get. Probably most of you might have used Tomcat, right? We use it. What is that? 8080 and 1521. Most of you might have used Oracle, right? 1521. So for every database, for every server, for every protocol, there is a default number. If you don't mention them, by default port numbers will be used. So what is the port number? Boss, if I am sending a message on port number 80, the receiver also will receive the message on 80, then only he can understand what I am sending. Right, boss? Okay. Now, look at this format. Generally, if I want to give a URL, how should I give? This is the format I have. No, I don't want to use this. Now already 443 is occupied by somebody else, someone else. I mention. If you don't mention it, by default it will take 443. Otherwise, you mention your port number on which you are sending. If I give it like this, my message is going through port number 500. Are you clear? Are you clear? Right. Now, this is how we are going to have. So, what is the syntax of URL? Your URL is going to be protocol, hostname, colon, port number, slash, this is syntax. But generally our URL port numbers are not used as we are going to give, get a default port numbers. I hope you are good with this. Now that's what I have mentioned here. So there are 4 parts of URL: protocol, hostname, port, path of the file. Right. Now the port name, okay, the host name, it can be a domain name or it can be IP address. Generally every server will have a particular IP address. Now generally if you want to communicate with any server, the server IP address will be there. Generally we are supposed to give the this is general URL. So remembering this IP address is a difficult. So the substitute this IP address with DNS. You substitute the IP address with the DNS. So if you can mention the IP address or you can mention the DNS. Now the point is, always I may not have a DNS. You may or may not have a DNS. Most commonly we will have it, but it's not mandatory that you should have DNS for every server. So in that case, I will go with what? IP address. Now it is an internal application. Let us say, if it is an internal application, I am using enterprise. Now one of the internal server is there through which I want to pull it. You may have or may not have a DNS for it. Right. So it can be IP address or it can be a host name. I may have host name or it can be IP address. So host can be a DNS name or it can be IP address. Right, boss? I hope this URL concept is clear. So when you go to URL, what are the things we have? 3 elements: URI, URL, URL. URI is Uniform Resource Identifier. URI can be a URL or URL. URL is uniform, okay, resource, okay, name, resource, your location, resource name, resource location. Generally we go with URL. URL has 4 parts: protocol, hostname, port, path of the file. Protocol can be anything: HTTP, HTTPS, FTP, SMTP, Telnet. Okay, lot of protocols are there. The next, host name, your DNS name or IP address. Then we have port. You are supposed to mention. Default port numbers will come in case if you don't mention. What are the default port numbers? HTTP 80, HTTPS 443. Then we have SMTS 25, FTP 21. Like this, default port numbers are there. Port numbers for servers will be different. Port numbers for database is different. Port number for protocol is different. I hope you are good. Followed by path of the resource. In that server, where is the data? Where is the data? Right. This is a basic example. Any other queries from your end? Now, look at the third one. This is a URN or URL. First, FTP. That is a URL or URL. What was that? It is a URL. Second one, URL. Because mail to is a protocol. Mail to is what? SMTP is a protocol. Third one is news. News SOC. Now what was that? It is not a protocol. It is URL. If you use protocol, it will be in the URL, in the in this URI. If you have any protocol, it will be URL. No protocol, URL. So news colon SOC. Any protocol is there? No protocol. It is URL. If there is no protocol, it is URL. If there is any protocol, it is URL. As simple as that. Now news colon SOC colon dot culture dot Singapore. It is not there is no protocol here. So it is a URL. Telnet is a protocol. If you have a protocol, URL. So 1, 2, 4 are URLs. 3 is URL. I hope you are good with this. So when you want to understand the first HTTP, we need to know client server. How many types of servers will be there? Application server or web server. Tell some of the examples of application servers. Application server, WebLogic, JBoss, then Tomcat, basically web server, Tomcat application server is also there, but web server is more popular, right? Then IS, okay, commonly used terminology for people. Okay, Tomcat, you can say Tomcat as your web server, WebLogic as your application server. Okay, then come back. Now, who is your client generally in the HTTP? In the HTTP, client will be a browser. Client will be a browser. Even in the Salesforce, who is your client? Browser is the client. From the browser only, we are making a request. Okay, fine. Now, let us come to the next point. When you are going with the HTTP protocol, it is a connectionless, it is a stateless. HTTP protocol is a connectionless, stateless. What do you mean by connectionless and stateless? Right. First, let us discuss about stateless. Now, Satish made a request to Salesforce. Boss, can you give me page number 1? They asked me, who are you? I told, I am Satish. My username is abc@xyz. Password is Salesforce123. Then server recognize your username password. Hello Satish, recognize your username. This is the page for you. They asked, I told ask what if I want page 1. They asked, who are you? I told, I am Satish@abc.com, password 1234. They told, recognize it. Now tell me what you want, page number 1. Then they give the page. Again I told, can you give me page number 2? Then they say, who are you? Just now I said my username password. Boss, we don't remember the previous communication. Every transaction is new for me. Now tell me what is your username password. Again I told Satish@abc.com. This is my password. Tell me what you want. Page number 2. Take the page number 2. Can you give me page number 3? Right? Who are you? Because whatever the communication I am making, that communication will happen for only the transaction. Once the transaction is completed, everything is lost. Again, you have to start from beginning. Simple example, boss. You go to ATM. There are 2 types of ATMs. One ATM, you swipe the card, make a transaction, then it will ask you, do you want to make another transaction? If you say yes, then again home page will come. You can make other transaction or withdraw or anything. This is one type. Second type of ATMs are there. When you swipe, you make a transaction. Once the transaction is completed, thanks for using it. Again, if you want to make another transaction, again swipe, transaction, thanks for using it. Again, right. This is general scenario which we encounter in ATM. There will be 2 types of ATM. When you swipe, when you made a transaction, it will ask you at the end, do you want to make another transaction? If you say yes, it will not ask your password again. It will continue. This is one category. Another category is when you swipe the card, when you make a transaction, directly it prints thanks for using. That means that's the end of the transaction. If you want to make another transaction, swipe the card one more time. Now what we are discussing is the second scenario. Swipe the card, make the transaction, thank you. Again, if you want to make one more, swipe the card, make the transaction, thank you. That means your old transaction data will not be forwarded to next transaction. It is called state. It is called state. So what happened? In the HTTP protocol, state of the transaction will not be maintained. It's a stateless. Whatever the previous communication you have done, that will not be carried forward, that will close there. Again, you want to make another transaction, again you have to start from beginning. So it is what? Stateless protocol. HTTP is a stateless protocol. Every transaction will remain a new transaction for you. Every transaction remain a new transaction. Simple example, you are making online payment. When you make an online payment, what the transaction is done, second transaction automatically is going to do? No, right? Again, it will ask you, enter your card number, enter your expiry date, enter your OTP, because every transaction is independent. Once I done the transaction with the same login, I cannot make second payment. Online payments, not even online, from websites. Am I right? Because it's a independent transaction. Every transaction is independent, which is called stateless. HTTP is a stateless protocol. HTTP is a stateless protocol. That's what is the major difference between SOAP and REST. That's what is the major difference between SOAP and REST. Swipe the card, make the transaction, thank you. Again swipe, make the transaction, thank you. REST API. Swipe the card, make a transaction. Do you want to continue? Yes. Make another transaction. Do you want to continue? Yes. Make another transaction. Another transaction. Exit. So REST maintains state of the transaction. REST doesn't maintain state of the transaction. SOAP will maintain state of the transaction. It's simple for us. But to understand this, we'll discuss hours together. But as simple as a single line, it maintains state. Okay, state. HTTP doesn't maintain state. REST will not maintain state. SOAP will maintain state. As simple as that. To understand this only, we are spending almost 10 hours. Right. I hope you are good with this. So HTTP protocol is what? Stateless protocol. Now HTTP is also connectionless protocol. What do you mean by connectionless protocol? Client. Now this is not only for Salesforce boss. Any technology you take, you can apply the same rules. Now client is sending a request. When a client is sent the request, server received the request. Client has sent a request, server received the request. Once the server received the request, what the server will do? Okay, when you are making a request, the client will establish a connection. Client will establish a connection. First, what the client will do? Client will establish a connection, then he will be sending a request. Connection, then he will send a request. Once the server received, what the server will do? It will close the connection. Connection is established, request is sent to me, server received the request, then immediately disconnect the client. Disconnect the client, they are not connected anymore. And server will take its own time to process the request. Once the server has processed the request, based on the data what they have, they will re-establish the connection to. Then they will give the response. You get my point? Client will first establish a connection to server, send their request. Once the server receives the request, server will disconnect the client, process the request. Once the response is ready, server will re-establish the connection to the client and the server will send the response. Now what is happening? It is not connection. Connection means connection should be there. Server received the request, process, then again send the response. So client established a connection, client send a request, server processed, server will send the response. It is a connection flow. Connectionless, client will establish a connection, client will send the data, right? Server receive the request, disconnect the client, perform your own operation. Once the response is ready, client will, okay, server will reconnect to client and the server will send response. It is a connectionless. So what type of protocol is this? HTTP is a connectionless protocol. HTTP is a stateless protocol. HTTP is a stateless. HTTP is a connectionless. Stateless and connectionless. I hope you're good. I hope you're good with this. Okay. Next, before we get into messaging format, first let us understand the basics. Stateless and connectionless. Okay. Now, sometimes in the HTTP, secure, non-secure, you use HTTP, somebody use HTTPS. At the end of the game, is HTTP protocol only, secured connection, non-secured connection. Protocol is what? HTTP protocol only. Protocol is not changing. Is secured or non-secured is only a question. HTTP is non-secured HTTP protocol. HTTP is secured HTTP protocol. Now, what is that S? By simply putting S, it will become a secure. Let us give a quick example here. Now, this is my server. This is my server. This is my client. This is my hacker system. Let us understand what is the basic purpose of that HTTPS. When you say S, it becomes secure. What is that secure? By simply putting S, that is becoming secure. When you go for that HTTPS, because people will be using, when you want to make a secure connection, use HTTPS, because it is also falling under HTTP protocol. Protocol wise, there is no change. Protocol wise, there is no change in HTTP and HTTPS. Now, I made, let us say it's ICICI Bank. Now, I gave HTTP. Right. When you are using this request, the username password is encrypted by using a basic HTTP protocol. Whatever the HTTP protocol we have using ETL, will be encrypting in the binary format. It's a standard format of encryption. Okay, no specific. Okay, you're not adding any one of your own specific format. It's a standard format of encryption. What HTTP is? It's a standard for everyone. Okay. Now, when you're sending this, the request was going to the server. When the request was going to the server, this guy, let us say, hacked the system. When you hack the system, the username password is received to the system. Now, IP address of the system is different. IP address of this server is different. But it doesn't verify whether IP addresses are same or not, whether the request is going to the corresponding destination or not. When I'm sending a request, there is no guarantee that request is going to the same server. I may have a proxy server at the backend. The request is received by the server. Now, when you send a request, there is no guarantee that the request is going to the desired server or not. I am assuming that I was sending a request to ICICI, but in between, some system has, okay, proxy system is there, which is capturing my data, and that system is making a transaction with the ICICI. Now, when some proxy system is taking your data should not be delivered. Now, what is the website you are trying to look at? You are trying to look at ICICI.com server, but in between, Capital Info server has interrupted, taken the details. But this HTTP protocol will not verify whether you are an ICICI server or a Capital Info server. Right. That is the reason what happened. The people go with SSL or TLS certificate. The people will go with what? SSL or TLS certificate. What was this? These people will go to some Microsoft or some GoDaddy or some XYZ vendor. They say, boss, give me the self-signed certificate or CA signed certificate. Generally, people take CA signed certificate. When they take a CA signed certificate, your private key will be there. Their key will be there, which is a public key and private key. Both of them are used, and triple DS algorithm will be applied, and the key is your encrypted. And once the key is encrypted, the certificate will be installed on your system. Now, once the certificate is installed on your system, it becomes what? The moment it becomes HTTPS, if somebody interrupt, it will ask you, where is your certificate? Where is your certificate? What is your IP address? It will identify your certificate. Boss, if you can show me your certificate, then I'll deliver my data. Until you show my certificate, I cannot deliver the data. Even if we had, the data will be delivered only when the certificate matches and IP address matches. So when somebody is sending the request to this, then what will happen? They verify this. If it is mapped, then the data will be sent to the destination. Now you are getting that HTTPS, but at the back end, now the point here is it has nothing to do with the protocol. Now, what is the key point that I was trying to convey? We will be keep on using now in the REST API. I will be giving some places HTTP, some places HTTPS. Now, it has nothing to do with the basic format of messaging request format, response format. This methodology will not be changing. Now, it is only authenticating that request is going to the destination. Now, it doesn't have any separate rules for that. As per us, when you are making a request to the server, which has SSL, will use HTTPS. Now, as per the developer, when I'm making a request, there is no difference between the way you make a request for HTTP and the way you make a request for HTTPS. This is the point that I want to convey here. I hope you are good. Right. So, in some of the cases, we are going to use HTTP. In some of the cases, we are going to use HTTPS. But when you are writing a program to integrate a system which has a SSL, which doesn't have a SSL, in both the ways, the format of our integration will not change. Request format will be same, response format will be same. I hope you are good with this. So, what protocols will be using now? HTTP or HTTP protocol only. Protocol is only HTTP. Or will be have a HTTP? Yes, that's for that authentication. Secured HTTP connection. Generally, HTTP is called not secured with the port number 80. HTTPS is called secured with the port number 443. But the underlying format of message and response, request message, response message, the way you send a request, the way you receive a response, everything is going to be same. That's a key point that I want to convey here. We are not interested on the SSL and all those stuff. Right. If they are installing SSL, I was supposed to send my certificate for integration. Okay. Now, let us come back. Now we are going with request and response format. Client and a server. Client is sending message. Client requests some information. Whatever the request is sending, that is in the form of a message. Now, what format of message is this? Generalized HTTP. Server is sending the reply in the form of a message. It is also called. Now, client send the request in the form of HTTP message. Server will give a response in the form of HTTP message. How your HTTP message will look like? If you are going for a HTTP message, how this HTTP message will look like? If you are sending a request and response, how your HTTP message will look like? This is the format of your HTTP message. What was that? Message header, blank message body. Body is always optional, but header is mandatory. When you look at HTTP message, all the HTTP messages will be having three sections. One section is header, blank, third one is body. Header, blank, body. This is the general format of HTTP message. Your HTTP messages are classified into two types: HTTP request message, HTTP response message. When I say HTTP request message, how the request message will be there? Let us understand. This is the format of your request message. General message format is what? Header, blank, body. Header, blank, body. This is a general syntax of HTTP message. Now, in the header, first line is called request line. The first line is called as what? Request line. When you are sending any request to server, the first line of the request header is called request line. Header, blank, body. Header, blank, body. Header, blank, body. First line is called request line. First line is called request line. What will be there in the first line? They will tell you which protocol you are using, to which server you are sending, what is the resource, what type of method. Is it for sending the data to server, getting the data from server, deleting the data from server, modifying the data in the server? Now I am a client making a request to server. Why are you making a request? You want some data from the server, you want to insert some data in the server, you want to delete the data in the server, you want to modify the data in the server. What you want to do? That will be given first. What type of request is this? Then to which is resource you are making a request, what is the protocol you are using. These three informations will be there in request header. So let me give you this. Now let us understand this in clear. Now the first line is called as request line. In the request line, what is the first one? Get. Get means it's a type of get request. Boss, I am making a request for getting the data from a server. What type of request is that? Get. What type of operation is this? Getting the data, putting the data, inserting the data. What type of request? I told it's a get. We are making this request to get some data from server. What is the next one we had? What is this one? Doc HTML test.html. What was that? This is the name of the resource to which you are making a request. Then HTTP 1.1. It is the name of the protocol, version of the protocol what we are using. Name of the protocol, version of the protocol. So what is there in the first line? Type of method, resource URL, protocol, version of your protocol. Then remaining request header. Request header means in which format you are sending the data to the server, in which language you are sending, okay, in which format you are expecting a response, in which language you are expecting a response, what is the length of the client, length of the data, if you have any security session ID or username, password, this thing. So header will contain which you can accept, in which format I am going to accept response, accept language, which language I am going to accept. Response should be in the language of English US. Accept encoding. In which format you have to send encoding for encoding. User agent, from where I am sending, content length. So this header will give you information to identify your request and the format of response you are expecting. This is to header will tell you the information about your request, the format in which you are sending a request, the format in which you are expecting a response. That information will be there in the header. The format in which we are sending a request, the format in which I am expecting the response, that data will be there in header. Now what is there in the body? Any data you want to send. Header will contain I am sending the data in JSON, I am sending the data in XML, I am sending the data in the text, I want the response in JSON, I want the response in XML, I want the response in English, I want the response in UTF-18. I want the response in UTF-32. I want the response in UTF-8. But what is it? In which format you are sending the request? In which format you are accepting the request? So the properties of your request, properties of your response, you are mentioning in the header. Body contains the data. I want to send, boss, name equal to Satish, industry equal to banking, phone number is 1234. I am sending this, you insert the record in the database. Now I told search text Satish. Based on the Satish, get all the records from opportunities and display. Now information what you want to pass, data what you want to give to server is in body. The properties of the request, properties of the response, they are in header. Now every request will have what? 3 parts. Header, blank, body. Body is always optional. The header. In the header, first line is called request line. In the request line, what you are finding? What type of request? Get, post, put, delete, trace. What type of request is that? URL of the resource, path of the resource. Then protocol, version of protocol. Then we have request header. Any authentication information, any format of your request, okay, format of response, their properties are mentioned. Body, if you want to send any data, that is there in the body. I hope you are good with this. This is what? Request message. This is what? Request message. In the HTTP, this is how request message will be there. Once I receive this request, I made an operation in the server. Now I want to send a response. Then I will see. These guys are expecting a response in the form of image. So I have to convert the response in the form of image and send it. These people are accepting the response, expecting a response in the US English. I am working in UK, EN UK. Convert them into US English and send it. That because I need to understand what you are looking also. Right, boss? I hope you are good. Let us see some examples. Everyone is good with this? Everyone is good with this, boss? Let us see some of the general examples. No. This is a request. What type of method is this? Post. What type of protocol? Okay. What is the host name? 127.0.0.1. Port name is 80888. This is a port number. Services, mock service, soap binding. Protocol is HTTP. Version is 1.1. They are giving accept encoding content type. They are saying, I am sending the content in the form of XML. They are saying, my data, look at this. What type of data they are sending? XML data. Now they are telling content type. The request, the data which I am sending in the request, it is in the form of XML. Because when you say content type is which format, then they know whether they have to parse like a JSON or parse like a XML. Now you are sending XML. How do they understand that it is an XML? How do they understand it is a JSON? If you convey, then only they know it. So content type, we are giving it. Then content length, host, connection, user agent, like this we are giving. Right, boss? Then let us take other examples here. Not opening. Okay. Just let us see one more example. Now, what was that? Get is what? The method. Some directory page.html is a path. Protocol is HTTP. 1.1 is the version. Then who is the host? Who is the host? Some school.edu. There's a host. User agent from where I am sending a request, Mozilla, connection close, accept language. What was that? Now, blank space followed by your body. I hope you are clear about this format. Request message will have what? What is the format of your request? Request will be coming in the form of request HTTP request message, header blank body. In the header, first line is called request line. Request line will have method, path, and protocol version of the protocol. That's what I mentioned in your hard copies. Everybody received this hard copy, right? That's what I mentioned here. HTTP request and response message. Message header, blank, message body. When you say request message, we have a request line, request header, blank, body. Then what is there in the header? In the header, we have first request line, request method, request URI, HTTP version. First one, request method, get, head, post. This is the URL, this is the protocol and version. I hope you are good with this. Clear? Clear for everyone? Right. Next, let us go to next one, which is called response message. What was this response message? In which format you are going to send a response? Request we have seen, response. Response also will be in the form of what? Response also will be in the form of what? Header, blank, body. But in the response, first line is called status line. By looking at the first line, we know whether the operation is success or fail. Whether the operation is success or fail. Now the first line is called status line. What is the first line? Status line. The first line is called status line. Okay. What will be there in the first line? First it will give you what is the protocol using which the response is coming. Now what is the status? Is it success or failure or processing or expecting a proxy server or redirection? What is the status? Or the code, the shortcut meaning of the code. Like 200, okay. 404, okay, URL not 4. Right. Now this type of things will be there. Now what was that? HTTP 1.1, which is called protocol version of protocol. Then we have status code and status token. Status code, status token. Now look at this. So what is that? HTTP 1.1. The protocol is HTTP version is 1.1. 200. Okay, is a code, status code. Okay, is a status keyword. Token, status token. Then it is saying, boss, the response is coming. Response is coming in which language? Now they are saying response is coming as a text and HTML. So the response what I gave, it is in the form of text and HTML. What is the length of the body? What is the length of the data? This type of information they are passing. I hope you are good with this. So let us take one or two examples of this response. We look at that, what was that? HTTP protocol version is 1.1, status code 200. After 200 they have to give OK. Then they told content type application JSON. They're saying I'm giving the response in the form of JSON. Response is in JSON. Okay. So this is a response format. I hope you are good with this structure, boss. By looking at the response message, we should be able to tell whether it's a success or a failure. And if it is a failure, why it is a failure. By looking at the response, we should be able to tell whether it is a success or a failure. If it is a success, No sample request and response also. Okay, fine. I hope you are clear with this response and request formats. Clear for everyone? Okay. So basically, this is a structure of HTTP request response. Now, what is that HTTP? Hypertext transfer protocol. Then it is going to be a connectionless and a stateless protocol, and the default port number is 80. If you are using HTTPS, default port number is 443. Now we are going for S, means it has some SSL or TLS certificate installed. When the old version is SSL, right now the current version what people are using is TLS version. Now SSL is the old one. Now the latest everybody is going with the TLS certificates. Now TLS, okay, TLS certificate. The next, when you are going with the HTTP, request will be there, response will be there. Message is going to be header, blank, okay, body. Body is always optional. When you take a HTTP request message, first line is called request line. Header, it will tell you what format I am sending, what format I am going to accept, any other sensitive data. Information regarding your request will be there in header. Any data you want to send, it is in the body. Then we have the second, response. When you go to response, first line is called status line. Remaining it says what type of response they have sent, what type of data they have sent, what is the length of the data they are going to give it. I hope you are good. Okay. The next, the second, what we need to understand here, when you are getting a response, what is the response course? We need to understand the response code. So looking at the code, we need to say what is the response code. Let us say 101, 102, 103, 201, 202, 203, 301, 302, 303. So looking at the response code, I should be able to tell. Now this is the basic format. I'll start from 5xx. 5xx means, boss, everything is fine with your request. The way you send a request is 100% right, but there is a problem from the server side. Okay, I am a server, application is running on me, you are a client. The way you made a request is 100% right, but there is a problem from my application or my server. When the problem lies with the server side, now the way you made a request is 100% right, there is no error from your end, but in my application, the way I am processing it, or there is a problem from my server, then it will be 5xx, 501, 502, 503, all this. 5xx means there is no problem from your end, problem from server. Problem from server. The way I am requesting, the way I am processing on the server is wrong. Then we have 4xx. Let us say one of the example. 5xx. Now you requested a resource. On the same name, there are 3 resources. Which resource I have to give? You made a request on the server. There are 3 resources on the same name. There are 3 resources on the same name. Then what will be the issue? There is not the issue from your end. Issue from the server side. It is unable to identify the resource uniquely. Now, suppose you requested the resource is moved out of the location. It is moved to a different location. So this is problem on the server side. Now, the way you are making a request, the problem with your request, whatever the resource you are requesting is not available. Whatever the security you have given, username, password, that is not right. So the problem from your client, it goes with 4xx. Now 3xx, you requested, it is redirected to some other. Now it should be, now what was that? Let us say you made a request. I am sending an OTP. Only when you enter the OTP, then only the request will be successful. So you made a request that action cannot be completed without another action. Now we are redirecting to another action to complete this transaction. Now you entered username, password in online. Now it made. Then what happened? It is expecting OTP. Once you enter the OTP, request will be done. So your request is completed, but you will connect to the system only when you enter your OTP. So it is what? Redirecting to some other action to complete your transaction. Are you getting my point here? The action is not completed, it is expecting some other action to be completed to perform this. Then 2xx, everything is good, connection is successful, response is going to come. 1xx, we received a request, we are processing it. Request is received, we are processing it. That all goes with 1xx. 2xx means successful. 3xx means request is received, processing, but some other action is required to complete this transaction. a simple example of OTP. 4xx, the way you are making a request is wrong. Maybe your password wrong, maybe a URL wrong, maybe a protocol wrong, maybe action. You are trying to insert, but on that URL you cannot insert. URL is right, but you told post. Using that URL you can only make get, but you are making a post. So there is a wrong way of making a request. The problem lies with the client request. The way you are making a request itself is wrong. 5xx request is 100% true, successful, but the problem lies with the server side. There is a problem from the server end. So are you clear? So 1xx, 2xx, 3xx, 4xx, 5xx. When you go down the line, we'll see error codes. With respect to what errors we are getting, we'll understand those codes. But as a top view of this, 1xx is what? Request received, processing. 2xx is for what? Request received, successful. 3xx is what? Request received, processing, but some other action need to be performed to complete the transaction. Then 4xx, the problem from client. 5xx, problem from server. When I say 2xx, 201, 202, 203, this type of errors. I hope you are good. Clear from your end? Clear? Okay. So let us understand next point. Before we go to the Salesforce HTTP, what type of methods are there? Okay. Let's take 5 minutes break and come back. We'll continue with this transaction.